The Azalea Bush, written and read by Norbert Kovacs. The trouble began when Frank Rossman complained to his wife Diane that a raccoon had gotten into the house. He said the overturned tray table by the kitchen's back door, the spilled box of cereal in the dinette, and the scuff marks on the living room sofa all proved it. You ought to make sure at night that you lock the doors, he told her as his heavy, wrinkled face reddened. Diane shook her head and told him that she did not believe any raccoon had broken inside. "You must have made the mess, dear," she said matter-of-factly, her grave features trying to hold firm. Her claim upset Frank. As if I can't remember whether I did, he thought. The next week a shelf broke in the bathroom while Diane was asleep, and he insisted a second raccoon had done it after entering through the window. Frank's mood took new, dark turns. He made a scene in the kitchen by slamming the pots and pans Diane had set to dry in the dish strainer. He felt upset Diane had questioned him over going to the grocery store and meant to show her his take on the matter. "You can't go threatening me," he said, banging the skillet on the crock pot while his wife stood by the sink frozen. "I'm in charge in this house." He walked away, telling himself that he hadn't been parts buyer at the factory 25 years to get bossed once he retired. Days later, Frank warned his wife not to speak to him when he watched TV in their living room. "How you always bother me," he yelled, waving his arms in anger. Diane's blue eyes set on him sadly, but he scowled, angry that she might think he kidded her. She has become like an illness, he thought as he picked up the remote. Diane shied from Frank more often. She sat in her own chair rather than beside him on the couch. She developed a habit of going to her bedroom and shutting the door whenever she phoned their son Matt. Diane began to see Matt in person over in Bolton, sometimes twice a week when she had used to see him only twice a month. Frank shook his large head as he considered the change. "She forgets me and harps on our boy," he thought, smirking. In mid-May, the old man was glad to have their son over for a visit. Frank had not seen Matt for over a month and hoped to get up to date on his family and happenings. They gathered to talk in the living room, Diane and Matt sitting close together on the couch, and Frank in his easy chair on Matt's left. When they had settled, Diane and her son exchanged a look, at which the tall, thin young man leaned forward. "Mom's been telling me how you've acted lately," Matt said to his dad. "She's convinced me something's wrong." Frank stared. "Just what?" "You aren't the same. You aren't as friendly." Matt adjusted himself on the couch and spoke with care. "Like you used to talk with your friend Tom down the block, the stout guy with the dark hair. Mom says things with him took a sour turn." The idea Diane had communicated this upset Frank. He did not grasp why she should have mentioned it to anyone. "We had a falling out," he said. "He did not want to hear me talk so much about our house, so I said we were through." "It happened suddenly." "Perhaps. I'm happier still not seeing him." "At the same time, you've quit your usual habits, even hobbies. You don't do your woodwork." Tom had employed a power saw at a table in the garage for more than 15 years. "You used to make shelves and cabinets all the time." "I built the things I will. It was my hobby and now it's not." "What's the issue?" "It seems to point to something bigger. You're not as involved. You don't treat people like friends anymore. You haven't been normal with Mom." Mrs. Rossman's tired face firmed. She seemed to have expected her son's words. "You claim to her raccoons got into the house, though the doors were locked," Matt continued. "You said a raccoon came into the bathroom through a window 4 feet off the ground. Mom checked the doors and they weren't broken in. The screen to the window had no damage." "Well, the place sure looked like a raccoon damaged it. I mean, chairs were overturned, the furniture in the room was scuffed." "The room had been fine, at least when I went to bed," Diane said. "And if it became a mess, it wasn't because of any raccoon." "I'm telling you, some animal got in." "Mom says you banged the pots in the dish strainer trying to make a clatter," Matt said. "How come?" Frank shrugged, for he did not understand the problem. "I was searching for a coffee cup and couldn't find any. I might have been frustrated." "Another time you told Mom not to say anything to you while you watched TV. She can't remember causing any trouble that you should have." "Why did you?" "Maybe it wasn't the best attitude to show her. But is it such a problem now? Like you should be pointing it out to me." "You weren't supposed to do any of these things," Matt continued more quietly. "This is why Mom and I believe you should see a psychiatrist." He offered a printed card from his pocket. "I've heard about this guy, Dr. Brenner. My friend saw him when he had family problems. He could help you." Frank shook his large, bald head. I won't see him. You ought to, Dad. Matt's insistence, pressing and certain, riled Frank of a sudden. My adult son instructing me in my own house, he thought as the muscles on his scalp tightened, acting as if he knows what's right for me more than I do, with his mother, my wife, encouraging him? The old man burned with rage. He rose from his chair and stood glowering. What a no-good son! Reproving his father, he cried, his dark eyes like fire above Matt's bearded face. Like you're anyone. You work at that dump accounting firm hoping to get ahead, hoping, but you never do, never get ahead, all while you live with that lousy wife and your lousy kids. Frank's hard, strong jaw tensed. He felt a struggle to speak. He turned towards his wife, half bowed in her seat. And you, the primped queen, plotting always to spend on your next outfit, browsing online for a new dress whenever you can, just clothing for you. He slammed his large hand on the hard, upholstered arm of his easy chair and scowled. He could not think of the next thing to say. He turned in a small circle before the couch, his face drawn, his mind fumbling. When he again faced Diane, he felt his anger return and that he could speak. Else it's fussing over the furniture. Fussing. The pillow must be at the couch end. I must move the chair closer to the window. All you're fixing when no one cares. Frank stood tall and stopped. At first he felt a strange pride that he could roar at them, yell and roar and not get a word in return. As he studied the pair on the couch, the sense crumbled. Diane's long, sad eyes and her bent form spoke of fear. She seemed too scared to speak even now he had done. Beside her, Matt studied him darkly. His face had set with defiance, his arms and forehead firm. He had cupped his fist as if ready to strike. The idea arrested Frank. As if Matt should think so, the old man told himself, becoming worried. He realized then he had gone too far. I terrified Diane, he thought. Matt is upset. If only one of them had been frightened or angry, I might not have believed it. They both are, though. The pain of embarrassment pierced Frank's hardened mind. He reddened, half upset, half ashamed, and did not know where to look. Enough of this, he said. I'm going onto the porch. Alone. He stalked from the living room without another word and went through the home's front door outside. Frank slumped into a wicker chair at the porch's far end, where he knew no one in the house could observe him. How could I have said all those things to them, he asked himself as he surveyed the springtime front yard. I had no control. The words just poured. He hated the pain these ideas brought and tried not to think. He let his attention fix on the azalea bush on the lawn before him. The bush was tall and attractive, he discovered in gazing. Amid its long, dark green leaves, the pink blooms showed their trumpets, the pistils inside like festive red hooks. He became lost in the azalea's fine shapes and bright colors. He recalled then he had argued with Diane over the bush soon after they had it delivered by the garden store last month. The scene returned clearly to him. With the azalea in its root bag on the lawn beside them, Frank had insisted they plant the bush alongside the stone fence with their neighbor. But dear, the neighbor's trees will throw too much shade on the bush, Diane had said. It won't grow. Couldn't we have it on the front lawn instead? Frank had stomped his foot on the grass, angry to be contradicted. The azalea belongs by the fence to shield our yard from the neighbor, he said, struck by the vague suspicion of the man in question. Besides, a huge bush shouldn't go plunk in the middle of our front yard. It's been clean grass straight to the road without so much as a flower since we've lived here. I won't have it spoiled. He walked away without bothering to hear Diane answer. Frank realized now his wife had not listened to him over the bush. She had dismissed his warning over the neighbor and his words about the lawn, and the azalea where she had planted it seemed beautiful all the same. His eyes wandered sadly over the fresh pink blooms. I was sure she would have done as I asked, he thought. I suppose I hadn't bothered to consider she might feel differently. His face drooped and his cheeks broke into creases as his truth weighed on him. But why hadn't I noticed, he asked himself. I must have walked by the bush since she planted it here, and I didn't see the thing right there before my eyes. Presently, Frank heard a car start on the far side of the house. He saw his son Matt's blue compact roll in reverse down the driveway beside the front lawn. He had ended his visit sooner than expected and was going home. Matt kept his head turned back, averted from the porch where his father watched. The young man hooked into the street and straightened the car to go. When he faced forward, he caught his father's eye on him from the porch. Matt's lean face tightened, his expression suddenly rigid. He raised his head formally, as if to wave, turned to the road, and drove away. Frank lowered his heavy head. Matt's sure I'm not okay anymore, he knew. I cried and yelled and convinced him. Maybe then I really am not okay. Frank wished no longer to stay on the porch. He rose from his chair. I'll have to face her, he thought, as he went and opened the front door. He passed inside and found Diane on the couch as earlier. She was bent from the waist, a hand supporting her cheek. Pity touched him to see how she sulked. I did this to her, he realized. She suffered my rants and stood my anger, and I hadn't even cared. He went and stood quietly before his wife. Did Matt leave the number for that doctor? He asked in a slow voice. I think I would like it. Diane raised her head. Her blue eyes scanned him with disbelief. However, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the card Matt had left. She extended it with her aged, creased arm, a question on her silent face. Frank took the paper and bowed his head, accepting it.